This August marks 15 years since I moved to Denmark, so you could say it's my Danish birthday. Anniversary? It's quite surreal to think that I have been here for so long. It's hard not to think about all the things that I have and haven't accomplished in this time. In a way, I achieved everything I set out to do, and at the same time, I feel like I'm failing at my adult life. In 2005, I wrote this. I'm so tired and unmotivated. I don't know how to shake that, but nothing is inspiring to me. I need a goal that I really care about, and then I'd be able to act. All I have is somebody else's goals and ambitions, which are good and reasonable, but they mean nothing to me and fill me up with emptiness and apathy. What do I want? What do I do? Everything I ever wanted seems lost. I no longer have time to get good at it. Drawing? I should have started long ago. Dancing? Way too late. Writing? It's pointless. Everything I care about is pointless. You can't make a living with these things, and I hate everything else. I wish I wasn't good at these things. I wish I didn't care about them. Then maybe it would have been easier to do something reasonable. Is life just going to be about managing the dread and pushing from one thing I hate through the next? If that's what it is, I'm not sure I'd like life at all. When I wrote this, I was just starting the second year of my university degree in tourism. Why tourism? No reason really. I was accepted in a bunch of programs. They were all boring. I didn't care about any of them, and that one seemed like the least miserable. But only after the first week I knew it wasn't for me. But I kept going because it felt like there was nothing else to do. All the things that I was really interested in were artsy and unprofitable. So I stuck with my program for 5 years. I graduated with an A, like a good little high achiever. And I was even accepted for a master's in a university in the Netherlands where I did an Erasmus exchange program. So you could say I was pretty set career-wise, and I couldn't have been more miserable. I had to start my master's in the autumn of 2009, and I was dreading it. I really didn't want to continue, but I think I was having a serious case of the sunk cost fallacy. Back in March 2009, I was working at a hotel reception. I was set to coast at my job until the end of the season when I was going to move to the Netherlands for my master's. But I was feeling quite unsettled and would every now and then frantically research other options. I stumbled upon an obscure program for graphic design in Denmark, and the deadline for application was just a few days away. I didn't even know exactly what graphic design was, but it seemed like a good compromise between career options and the things I was actually interested in. I was hit with a sudden burst of energy and put together a spontaneous application, feeling pretty sure that nothing will come out of it anyway, so why not? I ended up getting an acceptance letter and ditching my much more prestigious master's option to the dismay of anyone who learned about it. 2009 was a strange year for me. That summer, I ended the longest-lasting friendship I had at a time. I abandoned a career I was working towards for 5 years. I just completely set my life on fire and I couldn't be more excited. I felt like I was entering a new age. I was finally moving towards the goals and dreams I never before dared believe were possible for me. In late August of 2009, I arrived in the small town of Aalborg. It was cold, grey, and felt like I'm at the end of the world, but none of that mattered. I felt like I was finally on the right path. Maybe life had potential after all. When I graduated in 2011, I was hitting a new low point. I was losing my friends because they were mostly moving back to their countries. I was going through a rough breakup. My internship went kind of wrong. I almost failed my final exam because of mental health stress. I was doubting the quality of my study program. I struggled a lot and I wasn't sure it was all worth it. I had no desire to move back to my country. I already felt like a foreigner every time I visited, but I didn't want to stay in Denmark either. There was nothing really to stay here for, and I was feeling quite unwelcome from pretty much the very beginning. I was quite interested in moving to another country, but I had no money at the time. I didn't have the energy to plan such a move. I didn't know where exactly to go. So I kind of stalled. I decided to stay for the time being and try to find a job. I thought it wouldn't be all that difficult. Up until that point, I was accepted at every study program that I wanted to get into. I didn't really have much job search experience, but I figured it's the same thing. So I was in for a surprise. I spent a year and a half learning Danish, working on my portfolio, volunteering, tweaking my CV, reading about how to interview, going to job search classes, cold calling companies, sending hundreds of applications, working for free, going to network events, freelancing. I tried it all. In 2013, I was really getting sick of it all. I was about to lose another wave of friends due to people moving away, and I needed a change. This is probably where I should have left Denmark altogether. I had some savings, I felt like I was hitting a wall with what I could achieve here, and I still don't really know why I didn't listen to that feeling. There goes again that sunk cost fallacy. It always gets me. I decided that maybe my education was the problem, maybe it wasn't enough, so I decided to take this extra program that was advertised to us as a continuation. I applied, I was accepted, and I moved to Herning, which is another small Danish town, smaller than Aalborg. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't too worried about studying in a small town, but I should have been. I had 2 previous experiences that went pretty well for me. In both cases, I was able to make friends, and that was more than enough for me. I didn't need huge parties and crazy city life to be happy, and small towns are cheaper and closer to nature, quieter, and I value these things. So I moved to Herning. And thus I entered the dark ages of my life in Denmark, aka my lonely era. I expected to meet people through my studies. After all, that's usually the simplest way, but it seems like my social luck had expired. I didn't really click with anyone in my course or school, unfortunately. It was probably because they were already together for 2 years and I just joined. At that point, there was already also somewhat of an age gap. They were all in their early 20s while I was on the other side of the 20s. Another factor was that the course was mostly marketing focused, which I had no interest in at all, but I was only taking it because I felt it might improve my career prospects. And the people in my class were actually quite passionate about it. Spending 2 years in Herning was excruciating. It was boring, it was slow. I hated the town, I hated my studies. I was quite indifferent towards the people around me. I used every opportunity I got to get out of there. At some point, I went back to Aalborg for the weekend, and it felt like I was in New York. That's how stark the difference was. In 2014, I went for an internship in Shanghai, I guess to compensate for my small town's boring, lonely life. And what I discovered was that big city life wasn't my cup of tea either. Though I had a mostly enjoyable experience, I had no desire to stay. It was a strange time in my life. I felt lost, I felt old, I wasn't sure what I really wanted anymore. I tried to do some things that I hoped would look good on my CV, even though I didn't care for them all that much. And in retrospect, I'm not sure it really did anything for my CV either. It all feels like a pointless time filler now. In 2014, I finally graduated and I was free to leave. But the question was, where to? Most of my friends in Aalborg had already moved away, so it didn't seem like there was any point in moving back there. So the only 2 options I considered were moving abroad altogether or moving to Copenhagen. And I guess it's pretty obvious which one I picked. I moved to Copenhagen in December 2014, and for the first time I moved into a city without any plan. I didn't have studies, I didn't have a job lined up, I didn't know anyone. It was a really difficult move to organize. It's quite hard to find housing in Copenhagen. And unknowingly, I've walked into the most nightmarish roommate situation ever. The first few months were really, really hard and scary. It was the middle of winter. I was completely alone. I was dealing with this situation at home. But somehow I managed to figure it out, and finally things started to look up again. My first 2 years in Copenhagen were a true renaissance. I loved my new city, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hope and possibilities all around me. There was new energy in me. I was full of ideas and projects, and I was sure success was just around the corner. I met new people. It truly felt like I was capable of anything. I miss that time. I miss feeling that way. In 2017, I was starting to run out of steam. I had been looking for a graphic design job for 2 years and had nothing to show for it. I've sent hundreds of applications, did internships, freelancing, volunteering, everything they tell you to do. But I still had one idea left. I've always dreamed of being self-employed. Growing up, I saw my parents struggle with awful bosses and awful working places, so I was quite determined to never be in that position. My initial plan was to get a job somewhere, work for 2 to 5 years, get some experience, and then become a freelancer. So when getting a job didn't work out, I thought, let's just skip the middleman and jump straight into freelancing. Unfortunately, freelancing had its own pile of issues, and for the next 2 years, I had to deal with just more anxiety and burnout and disappointment. In 2019, a couple of interesting things happened. One, I met some friends through a meetup that I was hosting at the time, and one of them, who was making postcards herself, basically put the idea of cards and card making into my head. 2, I joined a few small Instagram challenges that helped me refine and come up with my current illustration style. 3, I went to my first art market. 4, I came up with 9 concepts for Denmark-themed postcards, posted them in a Facebook group, and people started asking me where they can buy them. 5, I opened my Etsy shop. 6, an art shop in the city agreed to sell my cards. That year felt like another time of revival. I didn't make a ton of money selling my postcards, but nothing had felt as fulfilling as this before. Seeing the way people interacted with them and how it made them feel brought so much joy and really helped my confidence. After so many years of rejection, I had completely lost faith in myself. I was doubting the quality of my work and my value as a person. So it was really good to feel a little bit optimistic again. And then 2020 happened. Man, can I catch a break? So actually 2020 wasn't that bad for me. My shop did surprisingly well. I was handling the lockdown pretty well myself. But the job that was paying the bills, that didn't go so well. And I'm still feeling the consequences to this day. I discovered all the nature nearby at this time too. Well, I knew it was there the whole time, but up until that point, I had been quite the nature snob, a nature purist, you could say. I dismissed Danish nature as being boring and not real nature, and I still think that's true in comparison to other places, but I've become a lot better at appreciating what I do have, and even though it might not be the best, I'd much rather have this than nothing at all. The following years, things got more and more difficult, and the prospects for the future now seem darker and darker. The cost of living is going up, and while my little business grew, it hasn't yet reached the point where it surpassed my side job income. This year, for the first time since I started my shop, it has been doing worse than previous years, and that's kind of scary. So now, 15 years after I set out to build my dream creative life, am I any closer to it? Honestly, it's really hard to say, and I have very mixed feelings about where I am right now. If someone told me 15 years ago that after doing all the things I was supposed to do, working hard, stretching myself way out of my comfort zone, putting everything I have into my work, I'd still struggle to pay the rent, I'm not sure what I would have done. I never expected the journey to be quick or easy, but I had no idea it was going to be this hard. The scariest thing is that I'm nowhere near achieving the goal. I I have no idea how much harder it's going to get. I have no idea if all the effort will ever pay off at all. At the same time, if I think of a parallel universe where I followed the path of hotel management and became super successful at it, if I imagine the best possible scenario, I'm not sure the person in that universe is going to be happier than me in this one. Even though lack of money is a huge stressor for me, money by themselves are not particularly motivating for me. And neither are fancy careers and fancy titles and prestigious roles. They mean nothing to me. What I really need is time and space to pursue my interests. And if I can't do that, I don't think I would be happy. I guess after 15 years in Denmark pursuing a creative career, what I've learned is that there is nothing else that I can tolerate being this intolerable and difficult. And I'm not looking to glamorize the struggling artist stereotype. In fact, I absolutely hate it. There is nothing romantic or special or desirable about struggling, and I don't believe that it makes you better in any way. I just think that it's dishonest to pretend that it isn't there. I also don't believe that one ought to struggle in order to deserve a reward or success. Honestly, I take getting lucky instead. Tap the like button to send some luck. It's true that in 15 years I haven't reached a place where I can comfortably support myself from my creative work, but I've had so many adventures. I've lived in foreign countries, I've moved alone to new cities, I made friends from all around the world. I traveled a little bit. Things often didn't work out. Things got really bad at times, but somehow I always managed to figure it out and to keep going. I created my own personal work exactly the way I wanted it, and people connected to it. Most people never get to experience that. I developed my own personal art style, which is something all artists dream about, something I'm a little bit proud of. I learned so many skills, mostly on my own, and there's so many other skills I want to learn and so many projects I want to do. I've achieved so many things I always wanted but never thought I would be capable of, and there is still so much to do. I just hate being so constantly broke and stressed for money. It's the one thing that sours all other experiences, and there is no end to that inside. I guess after 15 years, it's time to ask myself, is this worth it? Do I want to keep going? Honestly, it's hard to say. But whatever the outcome, I just really can't see myself doing anything else.